Genesis 1:28 and 29, God to Adam and Eve, and God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it. 29. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. I want to point out here that God tells Adam and Eve to be fruitful, to be full of fruit. And then he says, I have given you every herb bearing seed, every tree, the fruit of a tree yielding seed. And he tells them that that is to be their meat. He's not giving options to Adam and Eve. He's instructing them what is to be their meat. Now we'll go to Genesis 2:8 and 2:9. And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. 2:16 and 17. And the Lord God commanded man, saying, Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but the tree of knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. So we have two trees in the midst of the garden, a tree of life and a tree of knowledge of good and evil. But when it comes to the tree of knowledge of good and evil, Adam has been told at least 3 times what is good for food, the trees that he is to eat from. Genesis 1:28 says to be fruitful. 29, every herb bearing seed, every tree, the fruit of a tree yielding seed. And then especially in Genesis 2:9, and out of the ground made the Lord God grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. So, and then in 2:17, Adam is told that the day he eats thereof, that he will surely die from eating from this tree of knowledge of good and evil. So he's been told what is good. He was told also that he can eat from every tree of the garden, except from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So Adam has been told what is good for food. So the only knowledge that Adam would gain after eating from this tree is the knowledge of evil. He would only gain the knowledge of evil because he already has the knowledge of what is good. God told him that. And I believe the tree itself is evil because God told him not to eat from it, and he told him that the day that he ate from the tree he would die. So the tree itself could be explained as being evil. So now we have 2 trees that are the very opposite of one another. One tree that is called the tree of life and that is good for food, and another tree that is explained as being a tree of knowledge of evil and causes death. So one is of life, one is of death. One is good for food and one is evil. When we read the Bible, pay close attention. These verses in Genesis 1 and 2 are a description of what is good and what is evil all throughout the Bible. The Bible actually has a lot to say about food, and there are a lot of farming terms. We'll look at them together, but when we see these, I would take these scriptures literally. Just like Adam, we are being warned about the food choices that we make, what foods we should and shouldn't eat. And I know that we've been told that Adam's sin was a sin concerning food was only a spiritual sin. But I would ask myself, if Adam ate a physical fruit in a physical form, and the act of eating is a physical act, and it came from literally a tree, and he was instructed by God not to do this specific act, how can the act be turned into something that's only spiritual? How can the act not be a sin itself? It's only a spiritual sin. If this were any other sin, if this were killing, stealing, adultery, then the act would be considered a sin along with Adam's disobedience. So just remember that the Lord God himself said that this is the knowledge of good and evil. So I would think about that when I'm reading these verses. And then another question that I would ask myself is, what is spiritual sin? Where did it originate? Sin is found in the Bible, but where does it say that there are different types of sins, a physical sin or a spiritual sin, or I don't know, just one sin is different than the other, has a different category. I think if we're going to be told that these sins are spiritual, they should be backed up biblically. The Bible should say this, and so I would ask myself, where does the spiritual sin come from? Because when it comes to our salvation, I think, it's important to ask these questions. We should know the truth and whether or not eating the wrong foods are a sin against God or not.